back to another episode of Kim Wilpon Crafts. I'm your girl, Kim Wilpon, and today we're going to talk about the 5 things I would do differently if I were to start my knitting journey all over again. Yeah, so I'm going to try to do this from least important to the most important. So let's dive in. I would not, when I first start knitting, take yarn from other people's homes. And let me explain. Some people have moths. Some people have allergies to pets. My mom had a big moth problem for a while, and so she set up moth traps and all this stuff, but occasionally she still finds moths. And it's not that I don't want to borrow yarn from my mom or use yarn from my mom. I know now that I can stick it in the freezer, or there's a myriad of things I could do. I've had bed bugs twice in my time in the city, which is a very long time, so having them twice, I guess, not that bad. Some people never do. I didn't get that lucky. The first time I had bed bugs, it was really bad, and I had to freeze the yarn I could save in order to kill the bed bugs, and things I had hand knitted. Some of it made it because I stuck it in the freezer for months, I'm telling you, months. And so now I just have a little bit of a micro fear of using other people's yarn. And when I first started knitting, or even during the pandemic, obviously money was short, and I know people who have yarn past life expectancy, and so those people graciously gave me yarn, and I knew to prep the yarn before I used it. You can also steam it if it's acrylic. It's people who also buy a sweater from Goodwill or any thrift store, and they unwind the yarn. It's never good to just unwind it. You should also have a cleaning process for it, and some people pass it through a steam, so it sort of it unkinks itself. I would highly recommend that if you're going to do that. I also think that's nice and ethical too, if you're going to do that. I've been meaning to do that one of these days, but that's a trend. The breaking it down. Anyway, I digress. I don't want to get too far off topic today. Sticking to the topic. So that's one. I would not take yarn from other people's homes without being super cautious. Best judgment on that one, you know what I'm saying? 4 is buy yarn within your means. So people think before they start knitting that knitting is a cute little hobby. It is a cute hobby. It ain't little, and it can get quite expensive if you have taste for good quality yarn. And I have taste for good quality yarn. So from the start, it was always sort of expensive, and I had a hard time ever going to the acrylic and going to Michael's or Joann's and getting acrylic yarn. It was not ever anything I wanted. Even when I first started knitting seriously, was right after college, and I was knitting on national tours. I was just traveling a lot, and other people were doing coloring books or audiobooks or books, and I couldn't sit and travel and read books. I could listen to a book, but I couldn't read and write at the same time. And coloring was just too boring for me. I never got into Sudoku. And so to pass time, I started knitting, but I bought yarn from Lion Brand yarn. And I didn't just buy yarn from Lion Brand, I bought it from their store that was here in New York City. And so it was a little bit more expensive because it was from Lion Brand. And not even that expensive now that I think about it. But at the time, and I was 20 something, 22, it was whoa. But I do think that buying within your means is smart. So make sure that when you're buying, you know what you can afford, which sort of goes into my next point 3, which is buying yarn for your project, not just buying single skeins. I bought so many single skeins at the beginning of my knitting journey because I was traveling a lot. So everywhere I went, I would want to get yarn from a city, a state, wherever I was. And I'd always buy local yarn. So if I go to a local yarn shop in a town, and if I was in like Columbus, Ohio, not a small town, but city. Anyway, I just remember buying yarn from Columbus, Ohio. I bought some really pretty green yarn, and I don't have the hat anymore, and I overblocked it. I don't even know what happened to it. I would always make sure to buy yarn from a local yarn dyer if it was available, or I'd buy a single skein. And at the time, I guess I was really only knitting scarves and hats because I was too scared to knit anything more, even though I wanted to. But sometimes what happens now is I have all this yarn from the first like 5 years of me knitting, where I was just buying yarn because I liked the skein. Mostly is that I would buy like a single skein because that's what I could afford, which is great. But now it's just sitting and I'm like, why did I buy this? Or I had intentions to knit something and then I never knit it. And I guess that's part of knitting, but now as a knitter I try to be way more intentional about why I'm buying yarn and what project it's for and the purpose of said yarn. And even when I go to like Rhinebeck, I don't always go in to that shopping experience with like, okay, what am I buying yarn for necessarily? Sometimes I just want to be inspired by the yarn. And I make sure now to buy at least a sweater's quantity of yarn when I go, which I can break down in another episode of like how much I get for me when I go yarn shopping, so that I do make sure that I have enough. And sometimes I still get it wrong. So I'm not perfect and I don't expect you to be either. No expectations of perfection here. In fact, I expect us all to be delightfully imperfect and make lots of mistakes. So that was 3. Number 2 is, I think if I started knitting a scarf, let's say, and I really found myself enjoying it as a beginner, starting to knit again, I think after like 2 projects, I would actually just make the jump and buy interchangeable needles, because I think having a set of good interchangeable needles makes all the difference when you're knitting, because you don't need to have 1,000 straight needles to, like, let me show you. Just wait. This jar is like collecting dust here, okay? Some of these are actually like my needles, but some of them are also my mom's needles, and even beyond that, some of them are my great grandmother's needles, so they do hold special meaning to me. But there's only so many stitches you could put on here. And to do a sweater, you really can't, unless you're doing it in pieces and then sewing it together. So I just think that investing, while they're expensive, they are very much worth the investment for me. And this is probably my number 1 thing I would do differently if I started knitting for the first time. I would try to find a little bit more courage to try new stitches and knit projects I wanted to knit, even if they were out of my comfort zone. It's a big reason why when I do sweater reviews, I talk about its ability to be like a beginner knit or not. Because I used to be so scared of knitting sweaters. It was one of the major reasons why I wanted to start knitting in the first place. I wanted to be able to make my own garments. I've always thought that was really cool. It is why I asked for a sewing machine one year for the holidays, and I still haven't started that, but that's on my list this year. I've always thought that was really cool, and yeah, so that's why every time I make a video about a pattern, like a sweater review, I always talk about whether or not I think it's great for beginner sweater knitters or great for new knitters, because didn't have that kind of guidance, and I don't believe in gatekeeping, so I just always want to be upfront with you all if I think that it's worth, A, if it's worth knitting, or B, if it's good and accessible for beginners. Because I wish that I had known that I could have been knitting sweaters for way longer than I had. And and also, like, some things are not that scary. Like cables, I thought were like, whoa, cables, whoa. Cables are not that scary. Earlier this year, I learned how to steek. Steeking is, as it turns out, not that scary. And actually really cool. A really cool way to knit. I don't know if I think it's absolutely necessary to steek things, but I do think that it's pretty cool. And now it's a skill that I have, but I thought it was all so scary and big before. But I think if we can take out some of the emotionalness out of some things, we can really see things for what they are, and really also examine that it's all within our reach. And I guess that's just a little life lesson also. If you are also an experienced knitter watching today, let me know if you agree with what I said today, and also if you have any other helpful hints and tips if you had to start your knitting journey over again that might help somebody else. Because that's what we do here. We don't gatekeep. You don't gatekeep. I don't gatekeep. We just share the information. Share the knowledge. You know what I'm saying? Share the wealth of knowledge. And if you enjoyed this today, let me know. Also, if you didn't, that could be helpful for me too. Yeah. If you enjoyed today's episode, like, comment, subscribe, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye!